Have you ever thought that the first murder case in human history was not for money, not for territorial disputes, nor for any deep-seated hatred, but happened in a perfect family that lacked nothing? Moreover, the perpetrator and the deceased are biological brothers. Today, I am going to unravel a cruel truth for you. Why in this world, the people who most want to destroy you are often the ones closest to you. Imagine the ultimate version of the American dream. You have boundless land, no tax bureau to... This is the environment where Cain and Abel lived. They were the earliest wealthy second generation of humanity and inherited the resources of the entire earth. This is an extremely exaggerated reversal in such a utopia of extreme material abundance and complete lack of survival pressure. If you often read the crime statistics of the FBI in the United States, you may feel creepy. In the United States, the vast majority of murders are not committed by serial killers or street gang fights, but by acquaintances. In all acquaintance crimes, murder between family members is often accompanied by the deepest psychological distortion. We always take strict precautions against outsiders, but we don't know that the real killing intent often lurks under the same roof. I am your narrator, and today I do not intend to recite scriptures to you, nor do I intend to waste your time with traditional religious preaching. We will abandon all dry theological filters and use the dissecting knives of modern criminal psychology, neuroscience, and evolutionary anthropology to take you back to that ancient wilderness and solve the first unsolved case in human history. This is a hardcore story about jealousy, about losing control of the brain and nerves, and about the dark side of human nature, whether you are fighting in the workplace at the age of 30, dealing with family inheritance at 50, or looking back on your interpersonal relationships at 70. The logic in this story can definitely hit the most. Let's rewind time to before the incident occurred. The background of the story is very simple. The ancestors of humanity, Adam and Eve, were driven out of the Garden of Eden and gave birth to 2 sons. The eldest son's name is Cain, and he is a farmer who works in the fields. His second son's name is Abel, and he is a shepherd who tends sheep. In ancient times, names often foreshadowed a person's fate and psychological profile. Cain in the original text means to obtain or possess. As the first baby in human history, he carried all the expectations of his parents. He is a typical type, a personality, with a strong desire for control and a focus on results. He believes that as long as he works hard, he should receive all the praise he deserves. And Abel's meaning is, this seems to suggest his easygoing personality of neither competing nor competing, and also foreshadows his short life like Kealu. The trigger for the incident was a seemingly ordinary year-end report sacrifice. Cain took the produce of the land as an offering to God. Abel selected the firstborn from the flock and offered it along with the fat of the sheep. The result was unexpected. God favored Abel and his offering, but did not favor Cain and his offering. Isn't it hard for Cain to farm under the wind and sun? Sweat dripped onto the soil, and he put in tremendous labor. Why does a superior authority favor the younger brother who only walks with a flock every day? This sense of unfairness is the starting point of all family tragedies and workplace tragedies. To understand this sense of unfairness, we need to introduce a concept from evolutionary anthropology. In the early stages of human society's transition from hunting and gathering to agricultural settlement, there was already a huge tension between agricultural civilization and nomadic civilization. Farmer Cain represents a controlled mindset. I sow, I irrigate, I harvest. Everything must be under my control, and my input must equal my output. And the shepherd Abel represents a compliant mindset. Life is a gift, and the reproduction of the flock does not rely solely on human power, but more on nature and the protection of heaven. When Cain saw his own being denied, but this is not enough to constitute a motive for murder. What really pushed Cain into the abyss is an extremely terrifying mechanism in modern psychology called peer jealousy. Think about it. If you saw Elon Musk launch another rocket today, or Warren Buffett make billions more, would you be so jealous that you want to kill someone? Absolutely not. At most, you will only think they are very powerful and even regard them as idols. But how would you feel if your colleague, who shares the same office with you, eats takeout with you every day, and has a lower education level than you, was suddenly promoted by the boss to be your immediate supervisor, and their annual salary tripled, your heart will surely feel like there are 10,000 ants biting. Scientific research has... Matthew Lieberman, a psychology professor at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, found through fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging scans of the human brain, that when humans feel rejected, compared, and the activated area of the brain is the anterior cingulate cortex. Shockingly, this area is exactly where the human brain processes real physical pain. That is to say, when God rejected Cain and accepted Abel, what Cain's brain experienced was not abstract sadness, but a severe physiological pain, similar to being stabbed in the chest with a knife. Brothers are one of the most dangerous relationships in the world. French philosopher René Girard proposed the famous theory of imitative desire. He believes that human desires are not spontaneous, but arise through imitation of others. We want something because others also want it, or because others already have it. Cain may not have initially felt that his offering was bad, but he saw his brother gain the supreme approval, i.e. God's favor because of his offering. And that moment became the only important but unattainable thing in Cain's life. In real life, I don't know if you still remember the Menendez brothers murder case that shocked the United States in the 1990s. Although it was a son killing his parents, its core logic also stems from the extremely distorted allocation of resources and emotional manipulation within the family. In the business world, the famous German brothers Dassler, founders of Adidas and Puma, due to suspicion within the family and a struggle for parental approval, not only turned against each other, but also caused the entire town's residents to split into two. In these cases, we can clearly see the shadow of Cain, when a person's self-worth is completely built on the foundation that I must be stronger than the person around me. Once this foundation is broken, their self-defense mechanism will transform into destructive aggression. He sensed Cain's strangeness and gave the first and most classic psychological intervention in human history. God said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why did your face change? If you do well, won't you be accepted? If you don't, please savor this passage carefully. If translated using modern neuroscience, God is actually warning Cain that your amygdala is taking over your brain, and your rationality prefrontal cortex is going offline. Jealousy's sin is like a beast lurking at your doorstep. Its dopamine system is strongly tempting you, making you think that as long as you eliminate your competitors, you can gain peace. But you have free will. You must use your frontal lobe to suppress this primitive impulse. However, once the torrent of emotions bursts, the defense of reason becomes vulnerable. Cain did not heed this warning. That was a seemingly ordinary day. Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let's go into the field." This is called premeditated deception. The field, far from the sight of parents and the sacred altar, is a lawless place without any social supervision. When the two were in the field, Cain got up and beat his brother Abel, killing him. The process of the crime is only a short sentence in the text. When Cain lifted a stone or a farming tool and threw it at Abel, was he really hating Abel? No. What he hates is the reference point that appears useless. What he hates is the self that cannot control his own destiny. Abel's death was just a sacrifice of psychological. Modern criminal psychology has found that when analyzing passionate or resentful murder, the perpetrator is often in a state of dissociation at the moment of violence. Their empathy circuit in the brain is completely cut off, and the victim in front of them is no longer a living person, but an obstacle that must be cleared. After the murder is completed, the most exciting and spine-chilling dialogue appears. God is like an experienced FBI interrogation expert, knowingly asking a question, "Where is your brother Abel?" This is not to obtain information, but to give the suspect an opportunity to face their conscience. This is known as a variant of the Reed technique in modern police interrogation, which observes the suspect's baseline response through questioning. Cain's answer can be considered the most cold-blooded, cunning, and classic lie in human history. "I don't know. Am I guarding?" The phrase, "Am I my brother's keeper?" is so shocking. It is not just a lie, it is simply the highest level of human moral disengagement. American psychologist Albert Bandura pointed out that if normal people engage in extremely cruel behavior, Cain's words are drawing a line. I am a farmer. He is a shepherd. Although we are brothers, he is an independent adult, and I have no legal obligation or contractual responsibility to supervise him. What does his life or death have to do with me? Look at our society today. When you walk on the street and see someone fall and choose to take a detour. When you see colleagues being treated unfairly in the company and choose to remain silent. When you see a relative in trouble at a family gathering and choose to ridicule them. Am I the one guarding my brother? This extreme individualism and indifference are precisely the most terrifying psychological legacy left by Cain to humanity. Of course, crimes cannot be hidden. God said to Cain, "What have you done? Your brother's blood cries out to me." In ancient Middle Eastern culture, blood not only represents life, but also represents soul and justice. The law is restored. Without omission, there is no perfect crime. Cain was put on trial. What is his punishment? It is not about sacrificing one's life for another, but being expelled from the land he relies on the most, and becoming a wandering person on the earth. For a farmer who is extremely eager for control, and has built his lifelong sense of security on the harvest of the land, wandering and drifting is more frightening. This means that he will forever lose his sense of control over life, and he will face unknown threats at any time. Cain finally collapsed and said in terror, "My punishment is too heavy, beyond what I can bear. You drove me away from this place today." Faced with this cold-blooded murderer, God did not add insult to injury, but instead gave him a symbol, which is the legendary mark of Cain. God said, "Whoever kills Cain will be rewarded sevenfold." For thousands of years, some say it is a tattoo, some say it is a change in skin color, and some even associate it with the root of some form of racial discrimination. But if we look at it from the perspective of modern law and humanitarianism, this symbol is actually the first personal protection order in human history. Why did God? Because if someone kills Cain with violence, then human society will immediately fall into a bottomless pit of blood revenge, and violence will multiply infinitely like a virus. God's marking of Cain is essentially a declaration to all humanity that the power of justice and ultimate judgment does not belong to individual vigilante justice, but to a higher law. Isn't this the cornerstone of our modern rule of law society? Even for death row inmates who have committed heinous crimes, their basic personal rights are still protected by law before they receive legal trial and execution, and no one can deprive them of their life in their own name. At this point in the story, we need to stop and take a deep breath. As adults between the ages of 30 and 70, we have been struggling in the melting pot of society for many years. We have seen through the ups and downs of human relationships, as well as experienced countless competitions, comparisons, and betrayals. Why do I have to spend so much space telling you about Cain and Abel? Because Cain did not die at all. Not only did he not die, he still lives in the hearts of each and every one of us. As long as there is still unequal distribution of resources in this world, as long as there are restrictions on promotion opportunities in our workplace, as long as there are issues with property distribution in our families, Cain's anger can erupt at any time. The anterior cingulate cortex in our brain operates every day, and we subconsciously compare ourselves to those around us every day. Seeing an old classmate change a luxury car, seeing a colleague's child enter an Ivy League school, and seeing brothers and sisters get more care from their parents. Cain's grief, anger, and even hidden malice flashed at that moment. That is Cain whispering in our blood. But at the same time, this story also gave us the most profound antidote. The only scientific path to prevent the beast lurking in front of the door is to break Cain's zero-sum game thinking and shift towards a truly altruistic mindset. You may think that altruism is a very hypocritical and high-profile, but science tells you that this is definitely the optimal solution for self-interest. Research in neuropsychology shows that when we actively help and achieve others, our brain secretes large amounts of oxytocin and endorphins. These chemicals can directly lower the levels of cortisol stress hormone in our body, effectively inhibiting the overactivity of the amygdala, thereby reducing our anxiety, jealousy, and hostility. In other words, on a biological level, being good to others, the core of Cain's tragedy lies in his perception of Abel as an enemy who seizes resources. He thought that as long as he eliminated Abel, he could monopolize God's favor. But he was completely wrong. The resources of the world are not a fixed-sized pizza, and the success. If we can change our perspective and see our brothers, colleagues, and even competitors around us as partners in making the cake bigger together, when we no longer ask whether I am guarding my brother, but take the initiative to do so, I am willing to take care of my brother. Only then can we truly free ourselves from the internal friction of jealousy. If you are an entrepreneur, please consider whether your company culture encourages implicit vicious competition internally or cultivates altruistic teamwork. Countless cases of multinational corporations have proven that companies that adopt last-place elimination and encourage employees to compete with each other often end up in serious internal conflicts, even with confidential information stolen and core teams leaving. And those enterprises that advocate mutual achievement and benefit sharing can actually cross the economic cycle and go further. If you are a parent, please examine whether you have inadvertently played the role of that biased authority when dealing with your children. Do you always use one child's strengths to suppress another child's weaknesses? Please remember the lesson of the Menendez brothers, that parental favoritism and comparison are the most terrifying poison planted in children's hearts. What you need to do is to discover the unique shining points of each child, teach them how to support each other, rather than letting them play the cruel competition between Cain and Abel at home. If you are in middle age or old age, facing family disputes or regrets in life, I hope you can understand. Instead of spending the rest of your life in anger, it is better to choose to let go. Forgiving others is actually letting oneself go. Just like the final mark God gave to Cain. It was a Let's revisit today's hardcore journey at the end of the program. Firstly, we have recognized the scientific nature of jealousy. It is not simply an emotional issue, but a strong physiological pain that occurs when the brain experiences social frustration. Once we understand this, we should be more aware of our negative emotions and less indulgent. When jealousy strikes, take a deep breath to bring your prefrontal cortex back online and subdue the beast lurking in front of your door. Secondly, we cannot use it to conceal our selfishness and indifference. We all have a responsibility to each other to some extent. Thirdly, we have found the ultimate weapon to break internal friction, altruistic thinking. This is not moral blackmail, but a survival wisdom based on neuroscience and evolutionary laws. When we no longer keep our eyes fixed on the meat in someone else's bowl, but turn around and share the food we have, we can gain true security and inner peace. Brothers and sisters, on the wilderness thousands of years ago, the blood dripping in the soil still echoes to us today. It reminds us that although human nature is dark, we have the freedom to choose the light. You can choose to become Cain, consumed by jealousy and displaced. You can also choose to break the curse and become a guardian who warms the world around you with altruistic thinking. The decision-making power has always been in your hands. Thank you for listening. May you take care of your brothers and your own heart in this